Welcome to the first session of the full season of 2019 of the New York Society for General Semantics. That wasn't very enthusiastic. Much better. Much better. Well, we're awfully glad to have you all here and to be able to bring you this program. And I'd like to point out that this was free of charge. You may have noticed that. We don't, at the New York Society for General Semantics, we don't charge you anything for our events, but we do ask you, recommend that you join the Institute of General Semantics, where you can become a member for a nominal fee.
$50.
$50 for
an annual membership and a subscription to etc., the quarterly publication, and the annual Alfred Korzybski Memorial Lecture and Symposium. Free. Dinner. It's very
dinner.
Lovely.
What are they serving?
This year we're serving steak or salmon, but more notably the keynote speaker is Diane Ackerman.
No. It's Nadine Strawson.
It changed?
No, it's the Korzybski lecture is Nadine Strawson, the former head of the ACLU.
Yes.
New York Law School professor.
Okay. You better carry on.
Yeah, and the journal, etc., has been publishing regularly or irregularly, as the case may be, for a great many years, over 6 decades. Founded by S.I. Hayakawa, who once was the junior senator from California, and once edited by Neil Postman, and presently edited by Tom Gencarelli of Manhattan College.
Otherwise known as AV Guy.
Yes, who's AV Guy. And aside from the $50 membership fee, however, if you're a student,
it's $25.
It's only $25. Such a deal?
And if you come to the dinner,
a senior? No, no, we gouge the seniors. You guys are making out like bandits. I'm joining you pretty soon, but yeah. No, but anyway, so we do ask that you join the Institute of General Semantics, and along with getting the journal, you do get, as we mentioned, admission to the Alfred Korzybski Memorial Lecture and Dinner with Nadine Strawson, which will be Friday evening, October 11th, at the Princeton Club. The Princeton Club is in Midtown Manhattan. It's more hoity-toity than this place, but lacking in character between you and me. But it'll also be followed by a 2-day symposium on the tyranny of words on Saturday, October 12th, and then half a day on Sunday, October 13th. So altogether, a very nice event, and certainly well worth a paltry $50, let alone $25 if you're a starving student. It's just a meal or two of school. Anyway, as for the New York Society, I do want to note that unlike the past, I've actually come up with a schedule for the upcoming months. Usually just sort of like do it at the last minute by the seat of my pants, but this time, and this is actually directly following the symposium, which, by the way, we at the New York Society co-sponsor the Alfred Korzybski Memorial Lecture and the symposium that follows. And then Wednesday, October 16th will be our next event here at the Players. I don't know what we're going to do, but it'll be good. Then in November, Wednesday, November 20th, and in December, Wednesday, December 18th. See, I'm really well organized for some reasons. I don't know why, but I am. But as for today, we are very fortunate to have a session that I think is going to be both amusing and alarming.
We'll try. Just because of the presence of the three of us.
Yes, and I'd like to just read the write-up. The title is General Semantics and GIFs, or GIFs, or GIFs, or GIFs, or GIFs. We'll let them deal with it. A panel discussion on symbols and social media. And I'm going to read Mike's write-up of it. According to Wendell Johnson, General Semantics is concerned with the problems we have in trying to live with ourselves and with each other. He argues that we understand very little about what it means to be a symbol-using class of life, and that we fail to consider the connection between our use of language and the way we live. Understanding language as technique allows us the possibility of taking a critical position with regard to this powerful human dimension and the way in which our modes of communication give shape to our broader life world. Now, over the last several years, the GIF, or graphic interchange format, in case you're wondering what GIF stands for, graphic interchange format, has become an integral part of online communication. These short, moving images are typically emotive moments clipped from popular media that capture a sentiment or complex emotional state. Today, GIFs have been integrated to most social media services in enormous searchable databases, and users of social media can employ GIFs on their own or in combination with text-based communication, creating a hybrid form with both discursive or word-based and presentational or image-based characteristics. The exploration of this theme expands the reach of general semantics further into the area of online and digital communication in pursuit of Wendell Johnson's critical position. In what ways does this visual form enhance text-based communication, adding depth and complexity to our communication? How does the symbolic form relate to the process of abstracting, and what pitfalls does it present to clear and effective communication? How does the popularity of the symbolic form relate to Korzybski's notion of infantilism, and what defense can be made for the form's utility in thought and action? Will the panelists even consider these questions? We don't know. Maybe we'll find out. Let me introduce to you our panelists. And starting on my right, your left, and the person who organized and will take charge of this panel is Michael Plew. He is assistant professor, chair, Michael Plew. Make him feel better, right? He's assistant professor of communication at Manhattan College. He's past president of the New York State Communication Association. He's a member of the board of directors of the New York Society for General Semantics, that's us. And he's also pedagogy editor for the journal Explorations in Media Ecology. Did that happen?
Well, apparently, I guess that started.
Okay. And he's currently program planner for the Media Ecology Association's presence at the annual National Communication Association Convention. His research interests include general semantics and media ecology, particularly with respect to issues in education. Applaud him.
Wow.
This is the only chance he'll ever get. So.
Wait till they see how horrible it is, and then they're like, why did I applaud?
Yeah. Sitting next to Michael is Arsha Anwar. Assistant Professor of Communication, also at Manhattan College. I mean, do I have to cue you, or can you figure this one out, okay? Yeah. Dr. Anwar has worked in the communication and education fields in a variety of marketing, communication, editing, and teaching roles. Currently serves as the community manager for the New York State Communication Association, and her research interests include integrated marketing communication, philosophy of communication, and religious communication. She's published in the area of communication ethics, yay, ethics, and religious communication. Finally, we have Brian Kogan.
On work release for the ankle bracelet.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Brian is Associate Professor of Communication at Malloy College. He's the author of numerous articles, book chapters, and books, with emphasis on popular culture and media ecology, including works on punk rock, South Park, and Monty Python. He was the awards coordinator and a board member for the Media Ecology Association.
I appreciate a little piano music for you.
And he's going to sing
Hello, I'm Noel Coward.
For many years.
Stop ghosting me.
And he's a past president of the New York State Communication Association. Seems to be going around.
It is. It's like a virus. It's a lot.
Goes back to 1942.
I was 43.
You were 43?
Yeah. And he's also a Wilson Scholar, and he co-edits the zine Submerging, which highlights both emerging and established authors and photographers. So anyone who wants to get published,
I'll see him.
yeah, see him. Brian. And now it is my great pleasure to speak no more. Take my seat and turn it over to our esteemed panel and Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. This topic, I guess, at first seemed maybe a little off the wall. We were talking about doing a panel and bouncing around a few ideas, and this is something that's been on our mind, and ended up talking with Brian about it, and we spent a lot of time thinking about this topic and engaging with it in real ways. And so despite the fact that it seems a bit off the wall, I think it ties in quite nicely with general semantics, and that's, I guess, my job to start us off. So I've already been introduced. I'm going to proceed on to the next slide, which is GIF, you say. And the question is, how does one pronounce GIF? As Lance mentioned, it stands for Graphic Interchange Format. And how would you say it? I mean, maybe you know already, but
Graphic. Yes.
So of course I'm partial to calling these media GIFs and heathens, and we have, since our offices are right next to each other and we quite like this medium, I talk about GIFs and you talk about GIFs. And so when we brought Brian in, I thought maybe he would call it something else, and
I'm from Norway, so it's yip to us.
So the truth of the matter is, so the truth of the matter is,
It's early.
it's early. It gets weirder as we go. The truth of the matter is, the word is really GIF, and the debate is whether it's GIF like giraffe or whether it's GIF like gift. Right? And it's graphic interface. So we do have this fight going on. So I'm going to keep calling it GIF, and I'm sure Arshia is going to call it GIF, and you might call it YIF, but you feel free. It's very confusing.
Can I call it Jiffy?
You can call it GIF.
It's not confusing, it's just GIF.
It's just GIF. So part of the story here is, the map can be however you'd like the map to be. I'm going to call it GIF, and YIF. And that still doesn't answer the question, what is it? And so I'll tell you what it is if you sit down and
The answer
listen.
with us tonight. Edwin Booth, talk to us. Where is the secret skull?
Stuff in his room.
Let's go there now.
Pull the plug.
I can't, it's not really a plug. It's behind all these books, like a secret panel back
Then
there.
do the Bill Murray thing and just smash it on the ground.
Well, I'll try and continue. So, whatever you like to call it, whether it's a GIF or a GIF or a YIF, Lance already had mentioned a bit about what it is, but there's more to be said. And so, the graphic interchange format. Sorry.
Do you like the Bill Murray from Groundhog Day thing and just smash it on the ground?
I'll be back tomorrow.
It's a wonderful film. Happy sir.
Alright.
Thank you, lad.
Leave it to a guy who knows something about technology.
I know it's going to turn on again, it's fine. So the graphic interchange format was invented in 1987 at CompuServe, and it's one of its creators. The one person who gets named in the creation of this format is Steve Weilheit, who insists that it's called GIF, if you're a purist, despite the fact that most of the world calls it GIF at this point.
I call him Steve.
So you call him Steve?
Steve. Steve.
And so the format was created to compress short animated sequences. And in the early internet age, a lot of the GIFs that were seen online were things like under construction. And if anybody remembers maybe using Netscape or any of these kind of services, some of the icons were animated in very basic graphics. When a page was under construction, it had some twinkling letters and things, and that was the early application for this. I put an image of a crashing plane here because apparently the first GIF is said to have been a plane, although there isn't a record of what it looked like. And for a very long time, this format wasn't particularly useful except to dress up an otherwise drab and uninteresting looking internet. And the next slide actually features maybe the first GIF that I ever saw, although I wouldn't have known that it was called that, the dancing baby, right? And I can recall seeing this passed around at work and everybody being sort of in awe of the fact that you could see something like this on the intertubes, and it was all quite exciting. It seemed like some sort of revolutionary moment, although no one knew quite why. And so over the years, the application of this format went beyond just window dressing for the internet, and it was particularly the blog service called Tumblr that began to integrate this particular medium as its normal communicative practice. And the ethic early on at Tumblr was an ethic of creation. So there wasn't a vast database of these images to draw on. The people at Tumblr created them and then used them in forms of expression with one another to suggest emotions or reactions and these kinds of things. And it became a shorthand in that particular place between Tumblrs, as they were called, and became famous as a result. Now, of course, at the time when this was all going on, it was mostly kind of teenagers and young people, and it seemed quite impenetrable and an odd new language that they were communicating in that no one could quite decipher. And over time, the accumulation of this kind of communication and its whimsy and kind of the fun in communicating via GIF caught on, and there was demand to integrate it into other places. And today we can use this particular format on various mobile applications, on Facebook, on Twitter, and other social media. I wonder how many people have ever communicated in this form. Has anybody? Yeah, so right, it's kind of fun. What I'm going to start off as a transition from this little orientation, I'm going to transition to a little bit of general semantics here and talk about what I think this has to do with a broader point. Okay, and that is literally the only GIF I could find of the esteemed Korzybski or Korzybski. It's a little bit aggressive, that kind of Korzybski. It's a little aggressive, that repeating pattern of feedback or whatever it is.
Having a seizure.
But, you know, as I began to think about what this had to do with general semantics, I began really with science and sanity, and Korzybski's idea that each existing language really represents a conglomeration of different languages with different structures. And that's really the jumping off point for how we talk about this, is that this is another symbolic form in a whole vast array of symbolic forms that we have at our disposal. Many of them are familiar to us because we use them from birth. And these are new forms, new symbolic environments and new symbolic forms that we're just beginning to experiment with and learn about today. Korzybski talked about the distinction between physical and objective abstractions, which operate by leaving out details. So for example, the map, the idea of the map, maps work because we leave out details. And the mathematical abstractions that operate in deduction, where you can actually create an absolute map. So the postulates that define a circle, for example, a perfect circle, operate without leaving any ambiguity whatsoever. They create the entire parameter of the situation, and as long as that parameter exists as it is, the map is complete and works and functions, and it's absolute. And so, in this sense, you know, we're not talking about an exact science here. We're talking about abstraction in this sort of physical and objective idea. What is it that's being abstracted here, though? When we use this form of communication in combination with other forms of communication, we're abstracting something. And I think, you know, as we go along, we're going to get at what kind of abstraction is. What's the nature of this abstraction? I was mostly interested in talking a bit about map making in general. And there's a bunch of these, so if you're partial to puns like some of us are, you'll enjoy it, and otherwise I apologize profusely because it's just going to go on like this.
But it is a GIF.
GIF is masculine versus feminine. You want to, like, you know, put that in there.
GIF, is GIF the feminine, or is?
That's the question. Like
Okay.
what he said.
Okay, that's.
But that's also a GIF.
Okay.
That is a GIF.
Is it?
Is it feminine or masculine?
Is it?
Is GIF feminine or masculine?
Not full say.
I don't know, but
Oh.
It should be neither.
my friend and I use the masculine word.
You do? Le GIF? Un GIF. I like it. Sounds so much better in French.
See, we're fortunate to have someone from France.
So yeah, so
It's like
un GIF. I might just go with that from now on, and just call them GIF. Un GIF. Un GIF. It sounds very nice.
Yeah. Classy.
It's much classier. It dresses up this presentation just a little bit. When we make our maps in different symbolic forms, we're operating with some linguistic assumptions rooted in a lifetime of work in our native languages, our other symbolic forms found in the physical environments, and a complex negotiation of all of the other areas that we've learned to communicate. It takes time to adjust to new symbolic environments because we have to probe with our existing conglomeration and then map and remap by symbolic means appropriate to the medium. And so the only terms by which we understand this kind of communication is by the terms we already enter into the environment with. And so I guess in principle we're learning what this means and how it works and how to do it well and how this relates to sanity versus insanity, for example. Different parts of our symbolic conglomeration map in different ways, and we internalize the vocabulary and grammar that are most flexible and useful in our new situation. So we found this particular format, and we are beginning to learn to use it, and we're inventing the actual interaction between the existing symbol systems and this symbol system. And there's some excitement and energy, I think, in that. There's some promise in that. There's some promise, but there's also some peril, which is why we talk about both general semantics and media ecology the way we do. The word situation comes from Irving Goffman's work, and he argued that we learn to recognize a myriad of social contexts and the behaviors that are congruent with those social contexts that lead us to some sort of desired outcome. And so Mead, a fellow Chicago school sociologist, argued that we recognize all of this through play. And what we're talking about tonight is play in new structures that require mapping and remapping. And so, maybe familiar to some of the people who've traveled in the media ecology circles here tonight, media ecology builds on Goffman's example and that Chicago school example where we talk about play and the recognition of situations and roles through Joshua Meyerowitz work. And Meyerowitz talks, Goffman talks about new situations require new behaviors. When we encounter a new situation that we're unfamiliar with, we have to invent a new behavior to go along with it. And that new media represent new situations, and so anytime we enter into a new media environment with new symbolic requirements, with new norms and so forth, we have to figure those out, and we have to come up with behaviors that correspond with them. And so I'm suggesting that we're figuring out what the situation of online life is. We think it seems so well formed to us, I think. Everybody feels very comfortable that like we've got both feet on firm ground on the internet. And in fact, it hasn't been around that long, and some of that comfort is an illusion, and maybe a dangerous illusion. This form has entered into our regular symbolic toolkit, I suppose, in recent times. And so it represents a kind of a new behavior that is helping us adapt to the situation through abstraction in one sense. And I guess we'll get to what that abstraction is, as I mentioned before. The situations are abstractions of what? The behaviors are reactions to those situations. What's left out as we map and remap in this new situation? What's missing in our symbolic conglomerate that we need to account for? Where do we see symbolic play that we can call a new structure of language that becomes part of the vocabulary and grammar of our online situations? What do they mean in terms of general semantics in our pursuit of sanity? 90% of our communication in person anyway, in our interpersonal communication, is nonverbal. And so one of the kinds of abstractions that we talk about is the abstraction of that nonverbal element, is that we have text in order to represent what we verbalize, the discursive portion of our communication. But what accounts for that 90%, the presentational form, that is the tone, the gesture, the posture, and all of these things? And so I guess in some sense I'm suggesting that the GIF or the GIF is an abstraction of that dimension. The GIF is an abstraction of that dimension, the presentational dimension that gets lost in our typical sort of text-based communication online, especially with the speed of that communication. The last thing I wanted to touch on just briefly is the idea here that the difference that makes a difference, right? Drawing a bit on Gregory Bateson and talking about the way that we map this environment in an attempt to communicate effectively, and we leave things out on purpose. But in leaving those things out, we need to reintroduce elements that will deepen, I suppose, the experience. And so the difference that makes a difference, I think, here is personality, I think, is what I'm suggesting. And that in play, as we develop a sense of our personality, our relationships with other people, and learn to play off of one another in that sense, and grow to be the person we become through our relationships, it requires some sort of emotional investment. It requires some sort of shaping of the face, the mask, and the presentation of self. And so it's a bit like playing pin the tail on the donkey, as that one suggests. That we don't know exactly how we're going to do this, but in using GIFs to communicate, we're making a good attempt. The thing I hinted at in the description of the panel is Korzybski and Wendell Johnson talk a bit about infantilism, and if you just bear with me with a little reading for a second, I'd like to talk about the relationship between play, as children do in new environments, and the kind of play that this represents for adults in a new environment, and draw a parallel there through some general semantics here. What we have to say about infantilism then is in the main simply this: practically all of our maladjustments of whatever kind are in some degree infantile, in the sense that they involve directly or indirectly evaluational and reaction tendencies that have persisted since early childhood. Among the reasons for this fact, there are two of outstanding importance. The first is that much of what is learned early in life tends to be learned well, particularly if it involves crucial emotional experiences. The second is that in most cases, the early beginnings of maladjustment arise out of family relationships, and part of the reason why they persist is that these family relationships continue to operate sometimes all through life. And so as we build connections online with other people, and we probe by communicating, the feedback that we receive creates a kind of basis for the relationship. We see ourselves reflected in that relationship. And a lot of the maladjustments we have to the internet come from things that are missing, things that we're unable to do with our normal language tools, and the kinds of misinterpretations, the kind of antagonisms that arise, things that we rely on in order to have smooth communication in interpersonal relations offline are not present. And so I'm suggesting that this has the potential, at least on one hand, when done correctly, when done in a sophisticated, thoughtful, mindful, and nuanced way, can lead to some sanity perhaps in the exchange of personalities, the smooth communication, the interesting kind of play that we do with poetry, for example, and on the other hand, can lead to binary thinking, the kind of maladjustment that comes from positive or negative evaluations of situations without any of the gray area. And so, as my personal use involves, Archie and I like to play around with this quite a bit, and there's some clever play here. The two of us try to be quite mindful and playful and you know, do some, what would be wordplay if it were black and white on text or in speech. We try and do some play by exchanging meaning in these visual forms, and end up, I think, doing some stupid things, but some quite clever things at times as well. And it's quite fun to participate. What's the appropriate thing in response to this? And there's a lot that goes into it that I think she'll get into. But on the other hand, a lot of these social media services that I mentioned have added databases full of this content, have indexed feelings. And so if you're looking for a feeling, you simply type the keyword for the thing you'd like to say, a range of options open up, and you can simply throw them at each other almost. And so I'm suggesting that in the sense of general semantics, there's a way to engage with this in a sane way. There's a way to engage in this that represents sort of a more sophisticated, adjusted, mindful, nuanced, and clever way. The kind of play with abstraction that leads to clarity or that leads to some sort of understanding. And then there's the kind of blunt instrument way that has been set up because there's money to be made on this perhaps, stickiness on the internet is a thing. The more people engage with things, the more people click on things, the longer they stay on pages, the more it can be monetized, the more a brand grows and becomes successful. And so to the extent that people are simply being antagonistic to one another over these things because our infancy online has not bred healthy relationships, that this can in turn act like the kind of communication Korzybski was warning about, not particularly thoughtful, mindful of abstraction, semantic reactions being destructive, binary, a lack of self-reflection, immediacy replacing thoughtfulness and so forth, and that studying it in some way and talking about it in an environment like this at least opens up the possibility that the beauty, the poetry, the usefulness of this particular symbolic form can blossom and people can begin to use it well. The question as to whether they will or not is the same question that arises with all the rest of Korzybski's work and all the people who have followed him. Is this going to be effective? Enough people are going to listen to it, or are we just sort of talking to each other about this kind of thing? So I think with a bit of an eye towards a little bit more ground level approach to this, talking about some of the nuances and so forth. Are you ready for Dr. Arshia Anwar?
I can't hear you. I said, are you ready? Y'all speak the weed out there?
We're ready.
Drop the beat.
Bad. You're not. So, as he talked about the GIF, is a pretty dexterous, malleable way of providing a sort of interpretive flexibility. And the reason that's attached to the format is that they can be separated from their original text in various ways, in different levels, and so on. This gives them multiple layers of meaning that can be understood differently by different people, and so on. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that, going through a very popular GIF, which is what I call the burning dog GIF, but it is it's abstracted from an original artwork. In 2015, this was a webcomic called On Fire. It was made of 6 still panels. In 2014, the first 2 panels, one with the dog sitting at a table, and then one with one where he says, all right, there's the 6 panels. So the one with the dog sitting at a table, and then the one where he says, this is fine, were posted on Reddit, and they received thousands of upvotes. In 2016, the entire comic was animated. Now, the thing with this is, obviously when I talk about the layers of meaning, the this is fine GIF does not mean this is fine, right? So the idea behind it from the creator, artist Casey Green, is that, and I'm quoting, it's shorthand for when a situation becomes so terrible, our brains refuse to grapple with its severity. And it has been used to good effect in our current political climate a lot, with the Trump administration's many stumbles, I would say.
Personal opinion.
Sure. It has been used to great effect, though. Now, generally, the meme is used in the first 2 panels, as I mentioned. The thing with this particular GIF is the kind of relatableness and timeless qualities that it has is that it can be used in multiple situations. It can talk about, as the creator said, the feelings of things are burning around me, but, what are you going to do? There's really, it's a sort of self-denial that you get into, or hopelessness, where you're in the middle of a situation that you can't personally change or do anything about. Now, having said that, it can be used in a number of different ways. For example, even if you're not going for the huge, big effect of hopelessness or self-denial or those big feelings, you can still use the "this is fine" GIF to convey, for example, the situation of a swiftly arriving deadline, or finals are coming up and you haven't really studied much for that, and so on. So it's basically like, oh my God, like an oncoming train, and stuff is not happening the way that it needs to happen. I recently used it when the fire alarm on our campus buildings went off. And keep in mind that it regularly goes off about like once a week, at least. Okay? And
Tom, this is true, nod your head.
nod your head.
Tom does it.
He's the one that pulls it.
He's the one that sets it off, the pizza oven.
The pizza oven is off.
So the fire alarm goes off, and the person in our building who's responsible for ushering us out, Bob, he himself didn't leave the building, and so I'm standing outside, and he texts me, and he goes, I'm burning inside the building, and then I sent him this GIF. So in this kind of a situation, it's a more literal, understanding, and it's, applying to different things in different ways. Now, moving forward with this particular example, it's being usable in political context and so on. Here's a little exchange that happened with it in 2016. The Republican National Committee tweeted the image in relation to the opening day at the Democratic National Convention in Philly. And they accompanied it with a shrug emoticon and hashtags Dems in Philly and Enough Clinton. In response, the creator, Casey Green, tweeted his disdain about the Republicans using his artwork without his permission and without talking about him and so on. Then, the NIP, which is a political cartoon website, tweeted this response to the Republicans' tweet, replacing the burning dog with the Republican elephant. This version, incidentally, was drawn by the original artist, the creator of the original webcomic, Casey Green. So the point here is that GIFs are kind of working through different levels where you're able to move them from one place to the other, kind of putting on meanings in different ways and so on. The sender's relationship to the GIF is one thing to consider. The recipient's relationship or understanding of meaning is one thing to consider. Do people know the background of the original text of where it's coming from? What's going on currently or situationally to understand the current GIF in this context? And so individual differences, the meanings intended, are the meanings supposed to be literal? Are they sarcastic? Are they ironic? What are the other meanings that can emerge from the same GIF and so on? Now, having said the different levels of meaning, I'm going to be talking about 3 specific characteristics that GIFs sort of work within. And one of the qualities is that it offers a way for affective displays, a little bit of what Plu pointed to when he was talking about the idea of, the abstraction of text and those sort of things, right? So in a digital format, there isn't a lot of emotion that you can convey only through text. So a lot of that is done by GIFs, especially in relation to what are called reaction GIFs. Reaction GIFs are moments of repeated action or dialogue, and they are generally used, in tandem with textual communication, with dialogue, and so on and so forth. So the GIF is inserted in some way as a sort of reaction to what came before it. So there are different ways a person can show their reaction to something in a dynamic, performative, action-oriented manner that would be absent in a textual-based situation. And this is different, specifically from written text, bitmojis, or emojis, because there's no movement in any of these. There's, something is added with the GIF in what's happening. The GIF in this situation as reaction GIFs is a representation, a visual representation of what the user is feeling at the moment, or possibly how they would act in a particular situation. It allows for the substitution of nonverbal affective cues in a digital format. And in a sense, it is kind of embodiment where you are using someone else's body to say what it is that you would like to say in that sort of a situation. The second thing that I'm going to be talking about is the quality of GIFs is the idea of looping. So the aspect of motion or looping is something that GIFs are known for. So what's happening here is that time is not really a constant because it's going on in an endless loop at this point of time. The viewer can view the loop once, twice, or keep on running it. What happens is that each loop can offer different meanings, right? For example, the first time you can see, just kind of have a first example of what's happening immediately apparent and so on. Later loops can bring on details that you really didn't look at in the first viewing. The loop generally heightens the scene, specifically the emotional aspects that are generated through the viewing of the GIF. these are intensified by the repetition, especially true in relation to humorous or surreal GIFs. And then the third quality of GIFs that I'm going to be talking about is the idea of understanding GIFs as an aspect of shared culture. GIFs are oftentimes derived from movies, TV shows, video games, popular internet culture, and so on. They work really well the way they are intended when both the sender and the receiver understand the underlying cultural meanings, or most of the underlying cultural meanings. Interpretations of meanings are a result of things like intersubjectivity. You're taking into account positionality in culture and contextualization and those sort of things. So basically, getting a GIF in its varied meanings can be an illustration of the knowledge of various texts that came before and where the GIF is coming from, their levels of meaning as they moved through time. Especially when you're referencing popular culture, GIFs have layered meanings in a way where the specific intent can be understood better if you know the background of the text. So specifically in this GIF, it's a combination of two popular culture GIFs, right? So anybody in terms of where these GIFs are coming from?
Laura Dern, Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park is one, yes. That's the easy one.
I don't know the other one either. What's the other one?
The other one is a viral video that happened in 2013 that went viral. This is basically, it's called, I think, Brian riding a dirt bike.
Yeah, Brian! I plan these things well in advance.
It's called Brian riding a dirt bike in a T-Rex costume. That's the name of the video. And it went viral,
You run kids.
that kind of thing.
We got away with it too.
Doesn't it matter who the actors are?
For me it does.
No.
I mean, if it's Brian, yes.
But I know the first one's Laura Dern and the other is a famous actor. That's what gives me
But everyone
meaning.
knows Jurassic Park. I mean, it's one of
I
the.
don't know Jurassic
But you're
Park. I know
you're an
the
outlier
actor.
on that.
Okay,
It's
let's-
one of the most
you just
popular
said that was the
popular
Okay,
movies
so-
of all
She asked
time.
a question.
I never tried the movie. But you just made a point.
So I'm going to kind of bring together my portion of the presentation by just the last thing that I'm going to say is basically the fact that GIFs, since they're pervasive and intertextual, they can also shape our lived experiences and performance in the real world. Okay. Now here's my example of what I mean by that. The other day, our communication department administrative assistant, her name is Caitlin, she and I were sitting and talking and joking about feeling a little bit behind the times in the presence of some of our student workers. So when it comes to use of slang and those sort of things. So the poor student worker who was working at the time came to our defense and she said, no, you're cool enough. Cool enough. Right? And then Caitlin said, well, I'm cool with the youngins. How do you do, fellow kids? Referencing this GIF, basically. So, I mean, if you don't know the kind of where this comes from, this is from 30 Rock, and then this is used, or rather abused now, in terms of, trying to be cool with the kids, in a sense, right? So it's used so much that it's kind of abused now. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's moving from GIFs being online to GIFs being enacted and used in popular vernacular and back and forth, specifically with this example that I just talked about. And now, I am going to move it over to actually move it over.
Brian!
Uh-oh, you pulled it out.
What? Sorry.
That's right.
That's a night to please.
Oh, there you got it. Okay, you gotta start the slideshow.
Where it gets the typed on, would be great.
Yeah.
Because I was never known these like just to have any kind of visuals, so I know it's fairly, but I asked them very kindly to have some Python slides. And where's Brian? Where's Brian? Where's the Batman?
And then you're here.
Live or Brian?
That's your next one.
I thought we'd start with the prayer. Deus su Domine, Domine eis requiem.
Yes. I got it.
It's an intertext reference to Monty Python film, Monty Python the Holy Grail. That has been used, okay, I will say, going back a little bit, I've studied Monty Python for the last 5 or 6 years. I've co-written 2 books about Monty Python, a ton of chapters. I've done presentations on it all over the place. I think they were GIF makers long before there were GIFs, because they planned things to be very visually funny long before they thought, take this aside. So we're going to hit to get to the next slide.
This one.
Okay.
Damn French.
I've been looking a lot recently about Monty Python just because I've been thinking what I did not study with my colleagues is Monty Python fans, although I grew up with them. And so I'm trying to learn something about that that's in the future. But this is one of the most popular Monty Python GIFs that's out there right now. There's a whole page you can choose, and like, of course, there's pages, many pages of different GIFs. And it's good because it's so visual, and also like a little bit of like, like a tagline. And here's the big question before I get to what I'm going to say is like, has anyone here ever created a GIF? Okay. It's not that complicated, right?
No.
Or you could do one. And even if you had, say, a source, like, someone saying something or someone like mouthing something, could you also then add a line of dialogue to it?
Correct.
So here's what I want to do. 7 different points about GIFs with 7 different GIF potentials. So take your phones out.
Right.
I am not willing to be embarrassed except with you guys.
Right. My question is the weaponization of GIFs.
In?
No, it's the weaponization of GIFs. Because the point is that, like, this person created this in the 70s. Genius people.
Point number 5.
But they're weaponizing it now.
Point
for
number
their own
6.
political-
I thought you. Ha 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 ha! Dumb. Faisini. No, actually, we'll get to those points. If I don't get to them, we're going to be done in about
apologize.
10 minutes for the question and answers.
I apologize.
First of all, who to hide my last drink with? Pass the front. Thank you. Steve is an amazing band. Well, it's been from 8 years and tied for last.
They're defunct.
He works at an amazing college. Which college is that? And he's going to help me out here because I cannot read as well as I used to in the dark. So, what I'm going to try and do is get through 7 points very quickly. And some have been addressed by both of you very well. And so I will kind of rush through a little bit of those. And then get to you guys taking a picture of me. Can I remind you before I do that, that this is an ideal GIF. You do not want a full body shot such as the popular that I have right now. You want a good, just like, head and shoulder shot. Some of you teacher have done production before, you know what I'm talking about. So you want to do is like add to that. So point number 1 is that, as you mentioned very adroitly, there are multiple levels of meaning depending on when and what is posted and where it's posted. So a brief comment on that. The Tumblr is a different place to post these things than, say, comments on Twitter, comments on Instagram, comments on 4chan or 8chan, where things are remarkably different. And that some of the characters posted, like for example, Pepe, the frog, who became a symbol of white supremacy here, is used as a symbol of American democracy in Hong Kong right now. So things do change radically, and people use this often like, this would be a typical response to me making a bad joke online. That my friends would jump in and say, like, can you read that? Mm-hmm. So, first...
Brian, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
no, Brian.
Come on.
I apologize.
Let's get the first one first. I have a second one. So, the first one, let's get to zoom in. And what's in your field, feel free to share these as long as it humiliates me. So the first one is me going, you got that shot? Okay, I'm giving you something for your visual vocabulary right there. for free. Damn it. You should charge for teaching. Not much, my college, but I do have to charge for teaching. The question is, and I've been studying Python things for a while, let me get you one more, that this is the most popular one that I've seen in Python, which is go away or I shall taunt you a second time. By the way, with an outrageous French accent. As they mentioned, it's an outrageous French accent. So this one would be, if you want to post this to like a post, once again, get my face, get this, put in, go away, I shall taunt you a second time. By the way, Steve, we're still number 1. Steve's keeping track because I have other props. I've probably become Carrot Top in my old age. With worse hair. So the big question to start off with is, like, people learn how to use GIFs, GIFs, EFs, etc., but it depends upon the context in which they're posted. Because, for example, someone that you know is posting on your Instagram account, you're getting why they're saying, like, boring or like throwing shade, etc., whereas someone you don't know is posting that, like, like, what is that person doing? Why are they being obnoxious to me? So it's become a language that it's easily understandable, but also we don't understand it yet correctly. Moving to number 2. Steve, you have to remind me in a second. Wait, thank you. So, cultural capital is a thing that people talk about all the time. It comes from Pierre Bourdieu. And it's not that far from general semantics, really, quite frankly. It's the idea of, oh no, they finally found me.
I was still looking for you.
Look that way!
They're still looking for you.
That's my new punk name, Amber Alert. Doing a drag show on that. It's the idea that some things become cultural capital in terms of, do you know, for example, I'm in the conflict community, I'm like really I'm the nerdiest guy in this room. You not fight me right now. If you say you can fight me, I'll just go like, I'm sorry, which means you're not as nerdy. Can you do that? But the idea is that they've taken things from, for example, we're getting commodification about GIFs, where it's become, something cool has come out. Like a new DVD box set of, like, say Futurama. And here is, get ready for it, I have crumpled money, intentionally crumpled money. So it's always crumpled money. Ask Lisa. This is my favorite GIF of Fry. Can anyone tell me what the line is?
Here, take my money.
Shut up and take my money. Which means essentially, your idea is so good, I'm just throwing my money at you. Usually, once again, it's from that kind of milieu. By the way, if you use the word milieu again, you probably kick out of the bar. Okay, number 3. The thing is that this starts out as a grassroots thing, and eventually it's worked into the last presidential election. Both the Republicans and Democrats used Giphy, which is one of the main sources of it, to create ads based upon GIFs like this. It's a commodification of it. So this, once again, starts out with this particular one of someone saying, let me take a clip from Monty Python, and then, it's a good response to someone who's saying something silly, but then all of a sudden becomes, we'll use that and sell it as an ad for, say, once it was for both Hillary and Trump. So, number 3 was, Steve, remind me?
Rowdy Pepper.
Okay, this is from They Live. And I actually lost my really good sunglasses. So you have to go a close-up here. This is Roddy Piper realizing that half the world is aliens. So ready? Now that's what I call acting.
Nice.
The Players Club is proud of me. Like Edmund Booth's ghost is coming downstairs, like shake my hand after that one. And I think these things work in terms of, there's a cycle after that, because eventually you have to worry about what does it mean to rely upon this. Well, I'm not saying you have to rely upon this, but if you say that like this is the quickest way to respond to someone, Neil Postman talked about this years ago, why is the image more powerful than the word? And when does it become more powerful to use an image as opposed to a sentence, an essay, a George Orwellian sort of like novel about something? And I think that this is becoming not this particular image in particular, but why would you respond this way as opposed to other ways when things become easy? Should we always take the easy? Yeah, thank you. Should we always take the easy response? How many more do you have? That's a perfect one. That should be my introduction right there. How many more do you have? One more. Okay. Okay. So when you take the image of the word, I have to go for a more powerful prop right here. The most expensive prop, which apparently, according to conventions, chose me. Harry Potter is a very powerful prop.
Oh!
And so this is, by the way, it's Seamus Finnegan, who is like Mickey McMick, the most Irish name you could find in Harry Potter. So in terms of like Postman, in saying like, we're reliant on the image as opposed to the spoken word, I will use my typical Harry Potter spell. Once again, you have to get up here. Stupefy. You have to add stupefy this. Stupefy. Stupefy. You guys got that?
No.
Stupefy.
I got it, yeah.
I got no more than that. Two more, actually. The last two questions are with props once again. Thank you, by the way, Steve, for helping with the props here. Brings me back to, I forget the guy's name, you mentioned his name, the dog sitting in the room where it's burning around him. This is fine. He in New York Magazine recently said that he's been online all the time trying to stop people from using that image. Not doesn't want to not sell it, because he's selling it. So what does it mean when all of a sudden that becomes commodified enough that people are taking his stuff without his consent? And I think, I will tell you a really quick true story. I wrote a book about heavy metal, and someone in Germany translated it into German, published it there. I got no cash from that whatsoever, not that I made much money for the American version either. But if someone can take the German version, so I take it American version, translate it into German, that's easy enough. This is like, this takes a second and a half to do. So what does it mean when someone, and by the way, should Python get paid for this? I honestly don't know. And I know that they allow it.
Is it copyrighted?
It is copyrighted. And by the way, I'll throw in another Python thing, because it's almost done here. This is a classic Python line if you want to get this and use it forever in your classes.
Get on with it. That's okay.
It's an extra test, Joe. It's the idea that once these things become normalized, what is the future? How does it change? Where is it going? If this is it right now, what will be in 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years? For example, for right now, one of my favorites is a show about the future called Doctor Who. I'm using the most obscure science screwdriver right here. But get a close-up here. This is called I'm the Doctor, one of those popular Doctor Who GIFs right here. I have others. I have a pocket full of them, just in case you have extra time. And here's the thing. James Carey, eminent media ecologist and eminent media studies guy, a privilege to know him, once said that if you want to think about the internet now, you're thinking about film in 1905, or thereabouts. I might have gotten the year wrong. So what does it mean to say, like, if this is what we're using right now, if it means this right now, and all the other issues we put out are this as well, what's it going to mean in the future? And I think the best way to do this is to take out, it's not the exact thing, but I have, was it the nebulizer from Men in Black?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
I think it's much better you don't think of this stuff anymore. Let's just put this up and we'll look very closely, and all of a sudden, it's gone. Because there's no need to worry about this at all. Thank you. Most exercise I've had all day.
Brian, can I ask you a question? So, I know Brian for 40 years. We're actually very close friends. My question is that you give an amazing speech right now. So, what would happen if someone weaponized your speech right now with not putting it in context?
So of course, that's easy. That's
But
really
what would
easy to
happen,
do.
like, do you own it? Like, so you're talking right now with an amazing speech. So you did this with the thing. But what is, first of all, how do you respond to, like, what do you do? So like, if someone like weaponized your speech.
Can I ask Lance, because he's in charge of this, is there any copyright involved in this whatsoever?
Yeah, we own it.
No, it's not copywriting. It's a question, honestly, like.
Yeah, we own it. We own it.
I know
Sorry.
you're-
That's a big global problem.
We own you all.
It could be sued.
Sorry.
It's not a joke, it's honest.
No, I agree. No, I see what you're saying, Pat.
So the point is, like, someone shows you speaking right now and voices over something inappropriate, how do you respond?
I'd say you've seen a ton of that, if not up here. You can, like, if you want to go and find Mickey Mouse saying, like, fascism is cool or whatever, that takes about a second and a half.
But how do you personally respond?
I personally respond that when I talk in, I'll just say this, I want to turn up to the other two people in the panel, that when I talk in class, I say all opinions are my own. If you take it out of context, we should have a conversation, but I don't think anything I say is either controversial or indefendable. And I think that we should be allowed to have free speech in a class, in a lecture, etc. But of course, can someone do a deep fake of me doing anything? Like doing, like, loose stepping while I was doing those, like standing up things? Of course, that's becoming easier and easier to do. And that's a real big question for the future. How do we determine what's real and what's not and what the context is? That's an amazingly complex question that's coming up. So can I turn for you guys?
So a couple of things with that is the idea, and we talked about this, is the act of creation, that you are creating something, and especially with GIFs, this is a very kind of, it's not a top-down sort of thing. People are not creating these things and putting it out there. Now it's being commodified, but this is a participatory culture. It's basically people who are artists who are not known, who are kind of, I mean,
They're not getting paid.
right, but we can make this. This is something that sort of when I was kind of reading through certain texts and so on, I looked at the idea of there are famous artwork is being GIFified, for example, right? So there's the Mona Lisa who's smiling and whatever the heck. Again, you can't get there's famous artwork that's has a sort of meaning, a sort of, if you want to say reverence in the world, and that's being used to do these sort of things. So when you talk about the idea of, meaning being moved in certain ways, who owns this or who takes this away? At this point, I mean, it is a participatory culture. It is, internet is more of a, do people own the stuff that's put up on there? And there's a adage that says, everything that you put up on the internet stays there forever and you can't take it down. So if you can't take it down, do you own it? And all sort of questions.
Yeah, I think, I found something compelling. I guess I heard Mark Crispin Miller talk about this some years ago, about the idea that our culture, particularly because of advertising, but our culture is a culture of commodity, and it's one of the first times in human history where our culture has been manufactured and then sold to us, and then we adopt it. And I suppose in the age of participatory culture here on the internet, we've remixed it, we've taken ownership of it again. And so Lawrence Lessig is one of the people behind the Creative Commons movement and open source movement and so forth. And his argument is, in a culture particularly that's been sold to us, that's been created outside of us, sold back to us, that we've participated in as passive audience members, for us to then take hold of it again and to give shape to it and use it as a language to communicate with one another is a sort of liberty. It represents a sort of freedom. And anytime we have freedom, there's perils and pitfalls that go along with it. So on one hand, the concern is like, what happens if somebody uses his speech and does nefarious, terrible things with it, and changes it? Well, in a sense, that becomes the price we pay in a culture that has tried to recapture its sort of grassroots meaning-making, negotiation of meaning from corporations, from powerful moneyed interests and so forth. And so if our language becomes the language that they taught to us, and then we do what we always do with language, which is to repurpose it and create new meanings with it and adapt and grow with it, there's nothing out of the ordinary about that at all, except that we also have a legal framework that, you know, suggests copyright. And that's a tricky thing. I mean, Tom's talked about that a lot with music before. What happens when what happens when, you know, on one hand, like the idea that we're all falling in love with our music and it's so meaningful to us, and that without it, what's our life like, and so forth. The idea that, you know, everything costs money nowadays. We have to buy everything that's culturally related to us. And so what happens at the point of saturation where I've spent all the money I own on just being a normal participant in my culture, but I do have the possibility where I can sort of, you know, get it for free. I can snatch it and steal this book was like that, right? Isn't that what that was called? Steal this book, right? Steal this book, right? It's like that, right? It's the idea that, like, you know, take it back and use it and do something new with it and let's see where this goes. We're doing that now. And so there's a price to pay which we don't exactly understand how to cope with. Because on one hand, you know, if you're a musician or you're an artist or if you've created the great humor of our era and this kind of thing, do you not have the right to, you know, be compensated for your, you know, it's the system. But on the other hand, once you've transcended it to the point where everyone knows it, where it's become part of the fabric, where it is the culture, where it is a kind of language that we use to relate to our families and friends. I always told my students, you go home and you haven't seen your friends for a long time, and all the inside jokes that used to work have been replaced with your new inside jokes with your new friends. What do? You generally fall back on the media that you've been watching together, right? It's what's, you know, the ball game, and did you watch this particular Netflix show and so forth. And if that's the social glue, if that's the thing we're using, it's difficult to say what we do with the idea of copyright versus the idea with this vibrant new form. But I think it's just going to happen regardless of what we say. It's going to go on without us because it's what people want to do, and we're inventive and we take control of our culture. This is an interesting thing. I mean, what happens with Monty Python? I guess one of the arguments is Monty Python, you know, gets to be popular in generations beyond their own sort of time, right? Is that it becomes a kind of cultural language that transcends the moment in which they created it, and that's great. You live forever, right?
You know, it's interesting.
What about a second drink? There's one out there.
And I think, you know, obviously not everyone knows the movie, though.
Right.
So, and I think that really was brought out previously by the clip from Jurassic Park, because I think if you don't know Jurassic Park, then that clip doesn't make sense to you. I mean,
you know Laura Dern.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, Robin. See, that's what you're missing.
There's also what the mattresses fly across. The mattresses fly across.
You're missing the point that the whole joke of this is the second clip with the dinosaur. Right. Because this clip is when they first see the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Oh, so if you don't realize that, then you don't put together, you know, what is the joke here?
That was the point.
It is the juxtaposition. You know, so what do you make of it? You know, at that point, I mean, maybe it's funny just for being a bit absurd.
Well, it's intertextual, but yeah.
But you don't really get the point of it. So that it is a different kind of language, but it's one that's based on meanings that we, you know, an experience that we already have. So, you know, it's this kind of like privileges popular culture literacy, if you like. You know, so I mean, what did you say you were a nerd? Or geek or whatever? but those of us who watch, you know, I mean, I think there's something about those of us who know Jurassic Park and know Monty Python, you know, we're from a certain kind of, as you put it, milieu that other people are not. So it does also define who's
and I would say
in the know and who's not in the know.
You'd have to justify that before nerd culture. But I'll just say that Patton Oswalt wrote an article for Wired magazine about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 or 7, about, he called it Otaku is now normal. And anyone know what the term otaku means?
I'm cheating.
Of course you know that. How long have you been in Japan for? 10 years. 10 years. So could you explain better than I can otaku?
Otaku is basically just geek. It's people who have, they integrate it into all the other parts of their life as well.
But his argument in this article in Wired magazine was that when we were young, let's just say, I feel like me and Mike there, we had to look up who the Marx Brothers were. We had to look up, say, who Monty Python was. We didn't know that unless older people maybe, were we told this by VA or someone, like was it passed along to us? You could not go online because there was no online to do this. You had to find out what was nerdy. We go to conventions and things like that, and buy things. But it's it took a real effort to be a nerdy person back in the day, and now it's you want to be a nerdy person. Who's Cthulhu? Oh, done and done. I know.
So Brian, once again, I hate to actually monopolize the competition, but I'm watching the conversation, and I apologize if your name in the middle.
Arshia?
We're talking about Monty Python and all this kind of stuff, but you're just zoning out right now. Because you don't actually understand or agree with it because it's not your cultural, maybe it's age respected, or maybe it's
I am actually not zoning out. I was listening to him. I know what my Monty Python is about.
I'm not picking on you, I'm just saying that
No,
once
I
you start
understand.
curious
But
about
I'm
that,
trying to...
is it an age thing or is it
What
cultural?
is an age thing? I'm understanding exactly.
Never mind.
Well, I mean, potentially age could be a thing about something like that. But I think
I don't know what Monty Python is, and I'm proud to say it. And I never saw Jurassic Park.
let's go talk in the hallway.
Can I say one thing about this? I think to this point, syntax is a part of this, right? If we're talking about this as a kind of a language that, this is difficult, this is difficult to understand if you don't know what the cultural reference is. But on the other hand,
The reaction.
Michael,
these are
I don't think it's difficult to understand. Go back to the one with the Jurassic Park that I've never seen either.
Sure.
Okay, I see this, okay, I don't know that, I don't know that, I don't know that, okay? I see it as a sign of awe and shock. So it's not something, I don't need to know Jurassic.
Right, that's
But you
exactly what I was going to say. So
you
there
missed the
you
joke.
get a
You
surface
missed the joke
level
of it.
of the sort of things. You don't get
Whether you know the
different
text or
levels.
not.
You don't get the
I
levels
go
that...
straight to that.
Exactly. So you're looking at the surface
Right.
level in terms of this is what the reaction of these people is because they're seeing this, right? If somebody knows where Jurassic Park came from, they can understand that it's that type of scene where they
Right.
see and so on.
But here's the thing, I think this is, now don't be offended by it, but I think that this is.
Walk away now.
Great start that way.
I'll fight on your behalf, you don't mind.
I think it's a degenerative in terms of language. In other words, it's missing the complexity of, say, a word.
Sure.
And I think it can be.
Sorry, explain it more. What is it, degenerative? Explain it again more, please, sir.
Would you like to jump in?
Well, let somebody else go.
She wanted to jump in. Would you like to?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Jurassic Park, and I don't know anything about Monty Python, although my family does. I don't. But in my husband's profession, and he's an accountant and does auditing, they tend to round a GIF of Bernie Madoff. Everybody knows exactly what that is. So it is. It depends on who you're sending it to and who you are. But this could be communicated with a certain, as you said.
But can I say that the field could have jokes about, say, advising students that people would not get? Maybe you'll go, no, really, we're doing this, and they couldn't get Jan in class? Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So the point here is that when it clicks at a whole nother level.
Right. But my point is, it's going to click. I mean, the 40 people in the room are going to make sense out of that, regardless of whether they know Jurassic Park or not.
Right.
But I'm saying it's a kind of degenerative, might not be degenerated.
Yeah, no,
Okay, I wanted to ask about, just to get off the so said, animal, all right? throws a dancing banana down, and it's 2 pages of, oh no, the dancing banana just came down, and it completely changes the, takes the subject away from that. Can the panel talk a little more about not just the GIFs as visual GIFs, but also as the animated emojis and how they function?
Before that, you mentioned, what are visual images on, say, buttons in punk rock and new wave back in the day, where you just have like an image of a band, and I'm like, that's kind of the same thing way before we had anything animated. We did have because you would see something like, oh, that's something. I mean, to animate it or to do emojis, we had no idea back in the 80s. When did emojis? I think emojis are circa 91, 92. Am I wrong about that?
Around in the early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
We used to call them emoticons, you mean?
Yeah, right.
The emoticons predate that too. I recall people using emoticons badly back in the day and not really understand what they're doing. Like, it's like, until someone get like a rose right, like, so, remember those?
Yeah, little guardians. Old.
How would you get
Hope you're
that
not dating
wrong?
that person anymore.
If I can bring it back to Korzybski for a second, I mean, I started off by saying each existing language really represents a conglomeration of different language structures, and so I'd suggest that any of these things that we've added into our, what we call our native languages, the languages that we learn in speech as children and then later in writing and the other symbolic forms, is that we have to account for these new situations. And these new situations require, as I said, a kind of a mapping process, and that mapping process is, at first perhaps you test things out, so that somebody put the dancing banana in there for the first time, and it elicited a reaction. Yeah. And so you learn what that reaction is, and people don't put the dancing banana in that format, in that context, without understanding the consequences of, right? Yeah. And so we've learned that to a degree, right? And so the degenerative part, I understand, like, maybe degenerate is not, the degenerative quality is maybe not exactly where you were going with that. I think it's interesting though, because there's something inventive about it to compensate. And this is Postman's idea of the battle between the image and the word, right? And it's the humiliation of the word and all these kind of things. And certainly we're like way down the line in terms of, adding different kinds of symbolic, the depth of our symbolic relationship to what was the written word. The written word in changed speech and the relationships between human beings as they'd existed for most of our species history. We're adding in things now in a playful way in order to compensate for things that we can't properly communicate in the way we'd like to. This is a test pattern, right? Yeah. This is a baby's first step.
See that.
Right. And so, the internet is not a finished product. It's still sort of evolving. And this is one evolutionary step along the way, including the dancing banana, right? So who knows what it's going to be? It has a function, it has a syntax, it operates in the context of our communication to do something. It does it well, it doesn't do it well, it's a blunt instrument and so forth, but we'll continue to evolve it. So while it may have a negative effect on the word, for example, we might argue that. If we, as I said, if we did it the right way, it might have a complementary role in terms of the written word.
Brian.
Ken, you're getting on this.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, Mike, let Mike moderate, just first of all.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Brian, just because you need some order here.
Let's
and
see. Someone who has a basic, Robin.
I just have a very quick, simple question. What's the difference between a meme and a GIF? We don't know that.
You want to talk about that?
What's the difference? Because I was asking.
Simple question.
We've been debating.
What's the difference? Is it that a GIF moves and a meme is just an image? So define the terms. That's all I'm asking. Just define your terms. That's what we do in every speech.
Okay,
Define
you
our
asked.
terms.
Robin, you're barred. Out.
So if, I mean, do you want to try?
Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, I think when we're talking about a GIF, we're talking about a particular kind of
Meme?
We're talking about a medium, right? The GIF is a format for. So a meme can run across media.
It's
right?
technical, yes.
A meme is the characteristic of a media, a piece of content that communicates something familiar, that can be used
Is it a
in place of...
picture or an image?
It could be an image.
Could
It's
be multiple
mostly
things,
imagistic.
yeah.
And a GIF is a particular sort. I would say a GIF
Well,
falls under the... Yeah.
There's a difference between the original meaning of meme, which is what you're talking about,
Sure.
and I think Robin's asking about this this relatively new idea of social media memes, which are specifically graphic in orientation.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Those are sort of still images versus the animated versions, I think, is the basic term.
It catches on, it goes viral.
Sit down. Excuse me. You are not. Dude, sit down. Sit
She's
down.
not speaking at all.
Sit down, please.
We got it.
That's okay.
We got it.
man.
We got it. We got it. Don't worry, everything's under control.
In the original sense of the term, I mean, catches on, it goes viral, it, spreads, and it becomes part of cultural memory.
In the original.
In the original.
In the original. And now it means, now how has the definition of meme changed?
Well, I think it's a word that refers to two things. I think it's retained its original meaning, but it also refers immediately to a sort of a more like the dog cartoon in its sort of
First iteration
would be considered a meme, where the GIF or GIF version of it is an animated version that took on a different kind of life, right? But they both have the original. They both relate to the original meaning, where they're used as a sort of shorthand in a broad kind of communication. Yeah, man. Go ahead.
To go back to the cultural point, and what Sal was saying before, I think we maybe are making a little bit much ado about the distinction between what is discursive and what is non-discursive, what is presentational.
Right. Sure.
To say, do you get it?
Right.
Well, no, get it, what do you mean get it? If it's a propositional statement, then you can expect me to get it.
Sure.
If you add words to it, I mean, that's why your original GIF, even though your title was a little off, about, Magritte's painting and saying, this is not a pipe. That makes the exact point about the distinction between these two forms of communication.
Other people?
I think you can hear what she wants to say. Can you please speak? Because no one's asking her opinion. And it's inappropriate. Okay, fine.
Thank you.
As an animated meme?
Not completely.
I don't think the problem is we haven't defined it completely. That's the problem that we're having. And I don't know that we're going to be able to settle that today.
We might not be able to. The best I could say is a meme is a shared understanding of a particular image that goes across media, and a GIF could be derived from a meme, or could be part of a meme because it. Sorry.
So it could be independent.
It could be independent. So the reaction GIFs can so these.
Yeah.
I mean, that little girl is really, I mean, it's not quite a meme as such, but it's a GIF. It's a reactive GIF. It kind of displays affective emotion in certain ways and so on.
And the thing is, I think,
very well done.
It is a good one. It is a good one.
I was going with all these answers.
The idea of a meme is there's an iterative kind of character to it, right? Is that on one hand it might repeat itself with the same meaning over and over and over again as a sort of a common parlance, right? But that through that iteration it might also accumulate barnacles from other things and take on additional kinds of meaning. And so that GIF could do that, which is why in that original sense of the meme, that thing could have a pretty basic meaning that everyone can understand from looking at it. And iteratively, it just continues to mean that, but it collects those barnacles and means different things to different people and different uses. And that's the mimetic quality of it. That's how it operates, sort of like a meme. But because the meme was a non-animated thing at the beginning, that mostly what we understand as a meme is a still image with perhaps a caption on it to sort of right? And this is an evolution of that. Yeah.
I'm getting it.
Other questions? Yes.
Well, more of a comment again, but it seems to me that there are at least a couple of different kinds. That the GIF is a acronym for a technical kind of process. On the one hand, we have text-based communication largely online, and when we go from orality to a literate form, we lose all tone of voice, all the kind of emotional cues, which is where the emoticons originally started. So that this is almost like a kind of elaborated form of emoticon that we're looking at here. Whereas the other kind, the Jurassic Park one, is a kind of play with montage, and it's sort of, that Carrie's point, I thought was well taken, that it brings us back to whatever 1905 in film, where they're just working out the idea of film editing and the juxtapositions that you can create, which is that sense of play.
So how do you feel, though, if you send that to somebody? Do you want someone to respond to you and talk to you as a person, or respond to a smiley face? Like, what is your feeling and emotion? Like, what do you want for that?
Well, it depends, because, I've done this with Mike, and Tom. we've had like this. Yeah, we've had, very protracted exchanges because we know each other, and it's a lot of fun.
It's fun, and I think, just like anything else, I made ridiculous and horrible puns related to general semantics on my slides, and it was fun. I was being playful with a couple of things, and so there's a playful character to it, which is what's wonderful about, it's the kind of happy and wonderful part of engaging with one another in this way. This is fun, it's play, and that's what I suggest, is that in play we're learning something greater than what seems to be going on, right? Is that because we're playing and it seems so banal and mundane, we don't take it quite as seriously. Like, this topic seems off the wall, it seems a little silly. But on the other hand, because we're engaging in it and because we're playing, we're doing a lot of things. We're affirming relationships with other people. We're sharing happiness and joy with other people. We might be complaining to each other, and rather than complaining in any sort of substantial way, which takes on a different kind of tone, we complain in a way that you just kind of, when you're sitting next to somebody and you go like, and you roll your eyes at them. Well, I can't roll my eyes if we're not co-present, but I can certainly send a rolling eyes GIF. It's a nice compromise to.
Is it a higher rate of suicide, though, because people are actually not talking to people and just sending GIFs?
Probably not. Probably not.
I'm communicating every day.
Bringing government back into it, you're presenting different versions of yourself to different people depending on the situation, depending on the relationship, depending on what's happening and so on. I would probably not have sent any sort of GIFs to Michael 3 years ago. And now we communicate in pretty much nothing but GIFs.
Quite a lot.
So,
even though we're in offices next to each other.
But if you're in crisis, what are you going to do? A GIF or call somebody?
Both.
I asked her, not you.
Okay, well.
It depends on the situation.
Could you please tone it down, because you're being rude now.
I'm not being rude.
You
I'm
are.
honest.
You are, but you're being rude.
Well, I have a more gentle thing to say. I have a sister who's been very, very ill, and she probably watched this podcast, so hi, Laura. And early this year, I sent her some flowers early this year, and she texted me today. She said, "My flowers, the ones you gave me for my birthday, are still blooming and beautiful." Now, this is a sister who doesn't talk nearly as much as I. She's more close with her feelings. She's okay. So, and I wrote, I'm still blooming and beautiful, and I wrote just like you, because she's been so sick all summer, and I wrote that. And now she, who's not the talker that her big sister is, sent me this ridiculous GIF of these bawling woman, and that said so much. Because she couldn't say, and it even kind of looks like her, and just that she sent me this, I went, and it said more words than any words could say. And so, I mean, it can be, GIFs can be used when you just don't have the words, don't know how to say, or would cry to say, you just send this GIF. So, this was just today. And then when I copied out the program for tonight, I said, I bet you don't know, you just GIFed me. And I don't think she did. But I said, that's what my meeting tonight is about. So, I mean, that's really a nice thing. Thank you. I think so too.
And you think about sending flowers as also a nonverbal gesture.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly, definitely.
Because
All of them, sure, of course, yeah.
many meanings. Exactly.
But they're all for the most part, they're all very familiar. I mean, there's nothing ambiguous really about any of those things. So, that's why, reaction GIFs, right?
Yeah, the reaction GIFs, and just a kind of little, note regarding those. As Pooh pointed out, they're commodified now. So I got all of this from Jiffy. Yeah. And so the first one, the Oprah one, is the YAAS, GIFYAAS, right? So if you type that, that's what comes up. And then Obama is the mic drop GIF. This boy is the oh my god GIF. Yeah. And
I type spit when I find her by saying spit.
I thought that was coffee through my nose.
Sorry?
That's one of my favorite ones.
The dog one? I honestly I don't remember right now. But I did the very the most used sort of shorthand that I use, right? So the lady there is LMAO, laughing man. Sorry. Right. So that's and that's confused. I honestly don't remember what it is. I mean, it's actually confused.gif on a lot of places. I don't remember. So the fact is that these emotions are being commodified in ways where you're typing an emotion, you're trying to convey an emotion, and it's kind of, that's what's happening with that.
I think, interestingly, to your sister's communication, I mean, I think there's a range of different ways that we communicate in this form about our emotions that are, it's difficult to put our emotions into words. And likewise, we're not always honest about our emotions either. Is that we deflect and we do all sorts of other things. And in a way, if someone says something nice to you and you're unable to receive it in the way that might be traditionally thought of as gracious or something, but is that you're going to deflect whether it's in speech or otherwise. And so this is when you're not co-present to deflect by your body language or just brushing it off, you still feel the need to deflect it. You still need to she may have replied to you with some kind of silly thing, right, to change the mood. And I think these things as an abstraction, that's why, I thought about it as an abstraction this way, they're an abstraction of things that we do non-verbally when we're co-present with other people already to deflect emotions or to hide our emotions, to be very expressive about our emotions. It reflects the tone of the emotion as much as the specific emotion, and then the reason that we communicate in the way we do to either show or deflect. It has all of those functions, and I think that's the abstraction.
When it's visual versus
very different, very different, very different, very different.
Yeah. The question is, what do you rely upon, and when you become more rely upon like a visual versus a spoken word, that does change the way we think about the world. And I think it's like, neuroplasticity is a big thing people talk about these days, that these things do change our brainwaves. What does it mean to rely upon this stuff as opposed to conversation? I mean, I think it's radically different.
That's your point.
I think it's like man-centered conversation. It is. It's a man-centered conversation that It's pathetic.
Human.
Man,
I like that.
Ken, let's...
I'm leaving.
Great.
Ken, let's talk about this. It's okay? Just
I agree.
He's not Cub Scout.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to get away from, the stuff about interpersonal communication and conveying emotion, and commodification came up again a minute ago. It was the beginning of the conversation, and I sort of want to suggest this. It was, I think, Jameson who, in defining postmodernism, talked about pastiche, and in the age of the internet, that became remix culture.
Yeah.
And I think something that's going on here that you started to address before, and again, sorry, I'm hijacking it and bringing it back to it, is that I'll say it this way: if Gutenberg's printing press created the concept and the legal practice of intellectual property, the internet may be taking it away. It's unregulated. We're not doing anything in order to regulate it. And with respect to creative works, we get user generated content, because where's money in creating content if it's up for free and you can do whatever you want with it and change it and mask it and remix it however you feel.
I mean, listen, I would just go to McLuhan for that and say, smashing hierarchies and creating a much more horizontal relationship between people, and it has a degenerate effect on our respect for authority and our need for authority. Authority and power and those things are found in different places, right? And it's that in a more horizontal relationship, there's a different nature of power and authority and so forth. And that's why you see, when you see senators and garbage collectors and professors and all these other people communicating on the same platform with sort of an equal opportunity to voice themselves, more or less, people cease to, you see the backstage of everybody's lives, and you see the President of the United States tweeting things that you would think your crazy uncle would tweet and things.
Yeah.
There's a certain point where you cease to believe in all of those hierarchical, more traditional structures, and in this sense, it's like, right, it's like you steal all of it, because who cares, right? It's like, who are you to tell me I can't use it anymore? There's a sense that we've, that we've decentralized in this arrangement, and that has everything to do with our legal system and our culture and everything else.
Because for me, I'm talking about from like a Creative Commons standpoint, that the horizontal idea that's behind that, and you're saying it's spread to everything?
It's everything. I mean, it's everything. Like, no one cares about no one cares about what a senator says something and you throw two little fingers up at them online. Right? It's like no one respects those people for the sake of their position anymore. It's like, show me why I ought to respect you. And there's the illusion of authority and the illusion of power have been burst in favor of what have you done for me lately, and can you prove to me why I ought to respect you other than your degree and other than your position and your status and so forth. And that means a radical reorganization of things like copyright and authority and ownership and so forth.
Well, see, this is a good, generous understanding of, everybody can produce GIFs and, we're all co-creators and all of that wonderful stuff. But again, when we look at these big, organizations like Jiffy or Tenor, who are kind of collating this and making money off it. Like they're selling ads on that page where these GIFs are. So they are making money off these sort of things. So there is one way to understand it in terms of, it's giving the smaller person an opportunity to present themselves in a larger stage and so on. But there's also the fact that there's work being taken and, commodified to speak to, your point about what's happening in terms of making money off these sort of things.
It's a deal with the devil, right? On the one hand, I feel absolutely no shame whatsoever in stealing something for my own use. It's like,
why is that?
Well, because so I mean, there's me personally. So me personally is like, because I feel like all of these gigantic.
Fair use says you can use this for presentation.
Sure.
So this is all fine. This is
Sure.
not a bad thing.
But I guess if I'm channeling myself as some sort of stand-in for a general other, I might say I recognize that my paycheck goes in 10 different ways to the same corporations. I'm paying my cable bills and my streaming apps and my thing, and I take my kids on vacation, and I get all this stuff. It's all Disney. It's all, Comcast and all these companies. And at a certain point, it's like, I feel entitled in some way to the fruits of my investment in them in all these arenas. But on the other hand, I think I recognize that I'm not stealing these things so much as they're getting data from me in order to monetize my personality. They're monetizing my personality. I'm not an audience for them anymore. They are literally monetizing my personality by collecting my data. Every time I enter something into a search engine, every time I click something, every time I upload my face somewhere that they own. And so if the price of that is that I get free music and movies and TV and stuff, I guess that's a terrible trade. But I guess it seems a fairer trade to me now than it did before they were able to trade in my personality.
Nice rationalization, Mike.
Right? No, and that's why I said my personal story as a generalized other, which is maybe.
I also just want to say, Brian, you dropped the word fair use.
Where's the incentive for a creator?
That's a good question. Yeah. It's all a good question. I don't know the answer to that, right? I mean, I feel like the creator is trapped between these giant.
You're giving money to the corporations all along the way, and at no point does the creator.
Absolutely, and so maybe the story's familiar to you that like, I want you to create this thing for me, and what do I get out of it? You get exposure, right? I mean, that you're trapped in the middle of it, right? Absolutely. The economy is unfair on all of these different levels. It's unfair for the consumer because it's a shitty trade to trade your entire being and your personality for some crumbs of popular culture. And as the creator, what do I get? I'm sandwiched between the two of them. It seems only one end of this, one party in this entire transaction is really benefiting. So.
And legally, you have to watch out for fair use here.
Absolutely.
Because you can say, these are examples that we're using to make a point as part of this, this discussion. At the same time, this is a public event, and you're using those images. And
to that point, sorry, I'll shut up in a second, but to that point, a lot of these I just ripped out of Google Images. And whoever the author was is totally anonymous. A lot of people are stamping them. But you'll notice that this one, it's hard to see, but I identified the person that actually created that and put that down there because I thought, I thought it was an exceptional piece of art that I wanted to identify the creator, but it did have a caption. I stole that caption directly along with the image to attribute it, but the others, I mean, they're just in a sea of content.
But the law hasn't caught up to them.
No.
Nope.
The law is still the same as it was before.
That's the issue. Well,
Enforcing it is impossible.
Enforcing it is
Which is if the law isn't caught up.
especially when you look in Germany, I was surprised they could get away with that.
Oh, because I can't believe, I have nothing to do with that. I can't really get them. I could hire lawyers. That's more than we could get money from the book, so yeah.
But if you use somebody's arrangement.
Was it a good translation, Dan?
I speak German.
Well, as robust and interesting as the conversation was, I've seen a signal, the bat signal, that we are out of time. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you very much.